In the West, we are taught that focus is a virtue. If you are a shooter, shoot. If you tell stories, tell stories. If you simulate, simulate. So when a critic opens Where Winds Meet, a game that dares to be an action RPG, a modern online world, a life sim, and a social network all at once, he doesn't see innovation. He doesn't see artistry. He sees clutter. He writes, "None of these elements reach their full potential. But this is the difference between a tourist and a resident. A tourist looks at a bustling city and sees noise. A resident looks at the same city and sees connection. The combat supports the professions. The professions support the world. The world supports the roleplay. It is not a list of features jammed into a box. It is an ecosystem." IGN looked at a symphony and complained that they couldn't hear the solo. Because here's the truth most critics missed. Where Winds Meet doesn't just load a level, it loads a life. You log in, and the world hits you all at once. The wind, the grass physics, the signpost from another player, the beehive tip, the cliff, the raid camp below, and suddenly you are moving. Not because a quest told you to, but because the world pulled you. This is not confusion. This is maximalism done with intention. But if you judge a maximalist Chinese MMO by its ability to be a minimalist Western action title, you will stare at a miracle and call it unfocused. Six out of 10. To the uninitiated, that might sound okay. But let's look at the scoreboard. IGN gave Starfield, a game famous for its empty planets and loading screens, a 7. They gave Dragon Age: The Veilguard, a linear, safe, corridor action game, a 9. And they gave Where Winds Meet, the most ambitious Wuxia simulation ever attempted, a 6. They looked at a game that carries the sheer artistry and gigantic weight of the entire Wuxia literary tradition, a game that achieves the holy grail of combining Sony-level fidelity with the massive scale of a next-gen MMO. And they rated it lower than a loading screen simulator. Why? How do you confuse a masterpiece with shovelware? You don't have to go far for the answer. Just read the first 9 words of the review. Where Winds Meet. Review. An action RPG amusement park. This is the moment the patient died on the table. In law, we have a doctrine called the fruit of the poisonous tree. If your initial premise is corrupted, every conclusion flowing from it is automatically invalid. This sentence is the poison. The reviewer looks at Where Winds Meet and classifies it immediately and confidently as a Western action RPG. He isn't analyzing the game on its own terms. He is grading it against a template. He wants the safety of Dragon Age. He wants the simplicity of Ghost of Tsushima. And when Where Winds Meet offers something deeper, MMO 2.0 built on centuries of literary myth, he doesn't learn a new vocabulary. He punishes the game for making him think. This is intellectual cowardice. He is allergic to complexity. He encounters a system he doesn't immediately understand, and instead of asking, "How does this work?" he asks, "Why isn't this simpler?" Now, I want to be charitable. If you go to the game's official website, it does say Open World Action Adventure RPG. But here is the thing about game criticism. Genres are marketing shorthand, nothing more. A critic's job is to peel back the surface and understand what the software actually is. If we wanted critics who just repeat marketing labels, we wouldn't need IGN. We'd need self-checkout scanners. Here is the reality the review misses. The action RPG label is a Trojan horse. It wears the aesthetics of a Western action title: camera, movement, fidelity. But the skeleton underneath is pure Wuxia MMO. Structured party roles, frame-tight combat rotations, a server-side economy, long-tail, time-gated progression. But because he misidentified the species, he misread every behavior. He felt Wuxia pacing and called it slow. He felt MMO loop structure and called it unfinished. He felt the friction of a living world and called it confused. He was timing a marathon runner with a stopwatch built for sprinters. The game isn't half speed. The reviewer simply doesn't understand distance. And everything else in the review, every complaint, every misinterpretation, is just rotten fruit growing from the same poisonous tree. Once the reviewer decides the game is confused, he retreats to a very familiar, very comfortable criticism. The attempt to shove many different kinds of experiences into one game only ensures that none of these elements reach their full potential. He sums this up by saying, "By trying to do everything, Where Winds Meet doesn't really excel at anything." This is the classic Western critique of the jack of all trades, but it reveals a profound cultural blind spot. Western criticism idolizes specialization. We demand that every mechanic stay inside its own labeled box. So when IGN looks at Where Winds Meet, they see a pile of disconnected gimmicks. But to anyone familiar with the Jianghu fantasy, these aren't separate mini-games. They are the connective tissue of a single life. The fantasy of the Wuxia wanderer is not just killing people. It is the ability to heal a disease, to debate a scholar, to build a home, track a criminal, or run a storefront. And here lies the root of his confusion. He admits in the review that he played for roughly 30 to 40 hours. To a Western game journalist reviewing a single-player campaign, that is a full playthrough. But for a Jianghu MMO, that is the tutorial. You cannot understand how the economy, the professions, and the social systems synthesize into a society in the first 30 hours. In the first 30 hours, these systems look like a checklist of tasks. At 300 hours, they look like a life. He judged a 2,000-hour lifestyle simulation based on a weekend trip. He visited the city for 2 days, saw the traffic, and complained that he didn't feel like a local. Of course, the systems felt disconnected to him. He didn't stay long enough to see how they connect. Now, is Where Winds Meet perfect? No. The English localization is spotty, the UI font looks cheap, some early game gimmicks lack depth. We concede this. But hybrid ambition is not judged by whether every system is perfect in isolation. It is judged by whether the synthesis creates a richer world. The reviewer complains that these systems are running at half speed. Why? Because he is benchmarking the card battler against Slay the Spire. He is benchmarking the narrative pacing against a 10-hour Sony movie game. If you grade a decathlete by comparing their sprint to Usain Bolt and their swim to Michael Phelps, of course they look like a failure. But the point of a decathlete isn't to beat the specialist. The point is the synthesis. Where Winds Meet isn't trying to give you the world's deepest card game and the world's deepest farming sim. It is trying to simulate a society. IGN calls this design unfocused. Players call it ambition. And frankly, labeling a game confused just because it refuses to stay in the narrow lane you assigned to it isn't analysis. It's just a confession that you don't know how to drive on a highway. But the biggest failure of this review is the complete blindness to what makes this game revolutionary. And let's define that word. Where Winds Meet is revolutionary because it creates a new standard. MMO 2.0. It takes the deep, persistent systems of a traditional MMO, layers on modern social connectivity, and refuses to compromise on AAA action combat or graphical fidelity. It looks like a single-player Sony game. It moves like a character action game, but it breathes like a living society. IGN looked at this miracle and wrote, "An action RPG amusement park where every ride is being run at half speed." And the irony? The rides aren't running at half speed. He simply didn't ride any of the important ones. He stepped into a theme park, stared at the carousel, never left the entrance plaza, and then declared the roller coasters were broken. He wrote thousands of words. He devoted exactly one paragraph to multiplayer. And in that paragraph, he openly admits he had to play with bots because he reviewed the game before players were even online. And yet, somehow, he gives himself the authority to issue a final verdict. This isn't criticism, it's sightseeing. So let's make this absolutely, painfully clear. Where Winds Meet is not a single-player RPG with MMO seasoning. It is an MMO at its core. The combat loop is multiplayer. The progression is multiplayer. The economy is multiplayer. The identity systems are multiplayer. And he reviewed none of it. He ignored 80% of the amusement park. And then, this is the best part, he complains that the game feels disconnected and stuffed with paperwork. Of course it feels disconnected. It will always feel disconnected if you ignore the systems that literally connect the world. Where Winds Meet is the first real attempt at MMO 2.0 after 20 years of stagnation. It takes the core of why an MMO is fun, the shared life, and modernizes it. The geo-specific signposts, the in-game Instagram, an in-game Tinder. IGN calls this dizzying micromanagement. But to an MMO player, this isn't bloat. This is society. A living world should be complex. A city has a library, a gym, a dating scene, and a fight club. That isn't too many systems. That is civilization. He missed the synergy because he treated every feature like a chore on a checklist instead of a thread in a tapestry. He judged a massive, persistent society using the brain of a single-player tourist. That isn't just a mistake. That is professional negligence. This misunderstanding doesn't stop at mechanics. It goes deeper, into the world, the character, and the cultural backbone of the game. Early in the review, the writer tries to explain Wuxia for his audience. If you've seen Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or Kung Fu Hustle, you've experienced Wuxia. Superheroes who wield the elements and practically fly. This definition tells you everything about his perspective. He defines Wuxia entirely by its optics. Wire fu, floating swords, slow-motion kicks. In other words, he understands the costume, but not the culture wearing it. But Where Winds Meet isn't simulating a kung fu movie. It is simulating the Jianghu. And Jianghu isn't just 10th century China. It is society stripped of its lies. A world of survival, reputation, and consequence. The reviewer missed this completely. He looked at a reputation-based hierarchy and saw political chaos. He flattened the social order into a generic war story. And here is where the misunderstanding goes from harmless to catastrophic. He misidentifies the protagonist completely. The reviewer calls you a working-class, humble winemaker orphan itching for adventure. Stop. That sentence does more than describe a backstory. It rewrites the narrative. He is recoding the protagonist to fit a Western template. The peasant to hero arc. Humble worker, small-town upbringing, escaping the simple life. But to any wuxia literate audience, this is almost a parody. In reality, you are the young master of a wealthy household, an heir to generational wealth, raised under the protection of hidden grand masters. Your home, Bu Shanxian, isn't a working-class village. It is a utopian enclave. It is a place defined by safety, isolation, and power. In wuxia logic, you can only live in a place like that if you have immense power protecting you. This isn't humble beginnings. This is a sheltered aristocrat stepping out of paradise and into the fire. The Western hero escapes poverty. The wuxia hero is exposed to reality. By confusing the two, the reviewer didn't just get the details wrong. He rewrote the entire motivation of the journey. He complains, "Why am I curing diseases? Why am I collecting bowls? Why shove so many different kinds of experiences into one game?" Because in the Jianghu, a healer can be more feared than a warrior. A scholar can defeat a swordsman. The dumb can be terrifyingly smart, and villains are mistaken for heroes. Where the lowest-looking man at the table, cracking dad jokes, might actually be the... Calling this bloat reveals a critic who didn't read the genre he is critiquing. It's the exact same as reviewing Red Dead Redemption 2 and complaining, "Why do I have to brush my horse? Why are there camping systems? Why shove so many different experiences into this gun game?" If you think Western means cowboy guns, then the life simulation feels like chores. But if you understand that the Western is a frontier simulation, then the mundane is the point. Where Winds Meet is the Red Dead of wuxia. The reviewer judged it like Far Cry, China Edition. If a critic reviewed Tolkien and described Frodo as a homeless hiker, IGN would never publish it. But when it comes to Chinese cultural tradition, a literary lineage with the cultural weight of Tolkien, Arthurian legend, and samurai epics combined, IGN sent a critic with Wikipedia-level familiarity and gave him a loudspeaker. A critic can dislike a translation. A critic can dislike a mechanic. But a critic cannot plead ignorance of the source text. Yet here we are, 100% confidence, 0% cultural literacy. That's not a review. That's malpractice. The friction between action game expectations and MMO reality reaches its absolute peak when the reviewer talks about weapons. He describes finding a weapon item, and then complains that he had to actually play the game to learn how to use it. I probably went a solid 10 hours before I found a style, and that's without addressing the fact that I would now need to spend resources to level it up, just to see if I liked it. Let's translate this. He is angry that he can't instantly max out a weapon to test it without investing time, resources, or identity. He calls this a pain in the arse. First, this is objectively false. He claims he couldn't test the weapon, but the very first boss in Where Winds Meet gives you a special martial arts book specifically designed to let you test out weapon styles in combat. The game gave him the tool to do exactly what he wanted. He just didn't read the item description. Second, let's talk about the real issue. He is viewing weapons through a toy box lens. In single-player shooters, weapons are disposable tools. Pick up, shoot, discard. But in a wuxia MMO, a weapon is a class. Finding a bladed umbrella doesn't make you a master. It doesn't even make you a student. You have to go out into the world, infiltrate a sect, or steal a manual to learn the martial style. Think about the alternative. In World of Warcraft, if you want to try a new class, you create a new character. You start from level 1. You grind for weeks. In Where Winds Meet, you can unlock a brand new class identity on a single character just by doing a mini-quest. No alt account, no reroll, no reset. That isn't restrictive. That is one of the most player-friendly class systems in MMO history. And to put things into perspective, it is day 5 of the launch. I have already unlocked every weapon style playing casually. It took no time at all. This complaint, like most of the 1,000 words he wrote to justify the 6 out of 10 score, is a non-issue fabricated by mere incompetence. Then we get to the combat. And here, the reviewer accidentally praises the game while trying to insult it. He writes, "Managing when to defend and when to go all out felt almost identical to a Dark Knight in Final Fantasy XIV." Let's pause on that. To an action game tourist, that sounds like a critique. Oh no, it plays like an MMO. But to anyone who actually plays MMOs, that is the highest possible compliment. The Dark Knight in Final Fantasy XIV is the gold standard of rhythmic, weaving tank gameplay. He is admitting, accidentally, that Where Winds Meet successfully combines the tactical depth and rotation management of a top-tier MMO with the physics fidelity of a AAA action game. He thinks he's insulting the game for being slow. He's actually praising it for being tactical. But then he unpacks the ignorance. He complains that a Chinese Wuxia game doesn't play like a Japanese anime slasher. He writes, "This combat doesn't share any of the sensibilities of a Ninja Gaiden or Devil May Cry. There's no bouncing enemies or air juggles." This is genre Orientalism. He sees an Asian character with a sword and assumes it must be Devil May Cry. But Wuxia isn't about juggling enemies in the air like a circus act. Yes, there is Qinggong, likeness skills for movement, but the combat is grounded in physics. Wuxia is about qi. It is about weight. It is about the exchange of offense and defense. A spear has torque. Tai Chi transfers force to momentum. An open umbrella creates aerodynamic drag. He is judging a Wuxia simulation by the standards of an arcade button masher. He wants Devil May Cry. The game gave him Jin Yong's Legend of the Condor Heroes meets World of Warcraft. He didn't get a bad combat system. He got a system that was too sophisticated for his expectations. And if you need absolute proof that he doesn't understand what he's playing, look at his complaint about the bosses. He calls them super thugs. He claims they are just regular enemies with more health. This is objectively false. Anyone who has actually played the game knows these bosses have distinct phases, unique mechanics, and complex patterns that are 100% unlike normal mobs. But here is the reveal. He sees these mechanics, the telegraphs, the phases, the counters, but he doesn't see them as depth. He sees them as a chore. He looks at a martial arts master testing his reflexes, and he reduces it to this. Things really just get reduced down to a rinse-repeat cycle of parrying and dodging attacks, counterattacking, avoiding big telegraphed blows. My brother in Christ, you just described Sekiro. You just described Sifu. You just described Elden Ring. He lists the fundamental mechanics of high-level action combat, reading telegraphs, parrying and countering, and calls it rinse-repeat. Parry, dodge, counter is not a cycle. It is the genre. That is like reviewing a racing game and complaining that it's just a rinse-repeat cycle of accelerating, braking, and turning the wheel. That isn't a critique. That is the gameplay. He is criticizing water for being wet. But the moment where this review truly eats its own tail is when we get to the gear system. The reviewer looks at the stats, the set bonuses, the micro-optimizations, the wall of text, and he recoils. He calls it neurotic. He says the number of people who enjoy this level of depth could be counted on fingers and toes. Fingers and toes. This reveals a level of isolation from the PC gaming community that is genuinely shocking. If the gaming audience was actually as intellectually lazy as he assumes they are, the entire RPG genre would have died 20 years ago. He assumes that because he is terrified of a spreadsheet, the rest of us must be too. But then he notices a feature, the Quick Advance button. A button designed to automatically spend resources and upgrade your gear for you. A perfect accessibility tool for casual players. And what is his reaction? He writes, "Most people will probably just click the Quick Advance button, an option whose mere existence sort of makes a more damning argument against these overstuffed systems than I ever could." Follow his logic here. It is breathtaking. He complains that the system is too deep. Then he complains that the developers added a tool to bypass the depth for people like him. And he concludes that the existence of the solution proves the problem is fatal. This is a heads I win, tails you lose argument. He is angry that the game caters to two different audiences at the same time. It offers depth for the min-maxers who live for the math, and it offers a skip button for the journalists who just want to finish their shift. Complaining about this is like walking into a Michelin-star restaurant, ordering from the kids menu, and then getting angry that the restaurant also has a wine list. And here is where the review descends into total incoherence. Just one paragraph ago, he mocked the Quick Advance button. He hated that the game let him skip the grind. But now, he hits the level cap and screams that the game is slowing him down. Making me jump through a bunch of hoops is ridiculous. Don't tell me how to waste my life. That is the cry of a child who wants to eat dessert before dinner. He complains about gating. But in Where Winds Meet, the gating serves a specific design purpose: horizontal progression. The developers are saying, stop rushing the main quest, go fight a secret boss, go fix your build so you stop crying about the Quick Advance button, go solve a puzzle, go learn a profession. He views the red light as oppression. He is demanding the freedom to drive 100 miles per hour through a scenic route, and when the game gives him a speeding ticket so he actually sees the view, he calls it bad game design. And when the story ends on a cliffhanger, because it is an episodic live service game, he treats it like a defect. Complaining about a cliffhanger in an MMO is like reviewing the pilot episode of a TV show and screaming that it didn't wrap up the entire plot in 90 minutes. He treats a to be continued screen like a 404 error. He isn't critiquing the narrative structure. He is simply proving, one last time, that he lacks the object permanence to understand that a world continues to exist after he logs off. We have already documented his cultural illiteracy regarding Wuxia. Now, we are, once again, witnessing his structural illiteracy regarding the medium itself. And this brings us right back to where we started, the fruit of the poisonous tree. Because he misidentified the genre in sentence 1, he interprets the genre's structure as a failure in the final act. 6 out of 10. He wrote thousands of words to justify that score. But after digging through the culture, the genre, and the systems, we are left with one shocking truth. He didn't understand what he was reviewing at all. Let me be clear. We want critiques. Critique is how games improve. But when you judge a 2,000-hour live service MMO based on a 30-hour solo playthrough, when your review is riddled with factual errors, cultural illiteracy, and logic so broken it contradicts itself in the same paragraph. That isn't constructive feedback. That is noise. That is professional incompetence disguised as analysis. So, to demonstrate just how absolutely worthless this review is, let's do a mental exercise. Let's fix Where Winds Meet exactly the way IGN wants. Let's apply his review as patch notes. First, we rip out the rotations and synergy. We rebuild combat as a shallow spectacle so no one has to learn timing or rolls ever again. We redesign bosses into Devil May Cry fan service, so the fundamental act of parrying is no longer a rinse-repeat chore. Then, we lobotomize the gear system into an autopilot treadmill. We ensure that even the simplest buildcraft is removed, so no one is ever asked to look at a stat sheet or think about math. Next, we cut the filler Jung-Hoo life sim. We delete the doctors, the card battles, the rhythm games, the signposts, and the cops. We leave only combat outposts, so the world stops feeling like a society and starts feeling like a checklist. Then, we remove the immersive friction. We hand every weapon style to the player instantly. Mastery, sect flavor, and martial progression are replaced by instant gratification toy box sampling. Then, we tear out the traffic lights. No level gates, no server pacing. The main story can never say, slow down. The player is never nudged towards secrets or professions, only straight-line rushing until the content is dry. We also scrap the live service structure. We demand a self-contained console ending, so a continuing world can be judged as if it were a disposable 30-hour boxed product. Finally, we erase Wuxia and Jung-Hoo as a living world and replace them with a Hollywood costume. We downgrade a society built on lineage, reputation, and hidden power into crouching tiger superheroes, and rewrite a protected young master from a powerful household into a generic Western orphan in search of purpose hero. And once we finish sterilizing it, once the ambition is domesticated, we can finally rename the game properly. Generic open-world action game number 441. An action RPG amusement park where every ride is being run at half speed. The kind of safe, minimal risk, fully digestible product that gets a comfortable 8 out of 10 from IGN and is forgotten 2 weeks later. The version of Where Winds Meet that he wanted is the exact version that shouldn't exist. Because when you strip away the friction, you strip away the soul. He didn't want a society. He wanted a snack. He didn't want Jung-Hoo. He wanted sugar. And he told you that directly. The sugary treats at the concession stands come with piles of paperwork before you can chow down. But here's what he never understood. In Wuxia, in MMOs, in life, the sugar only exists because of the weight that surrounds it. The paperwork, that's obligation, reputation, debt, honor, history. Take it away, and the sweetness means nothing. It's just empty calories in digital form. He looked at a game simulating a civilization and condemned it because it asked him to behave like a citizen, not a tourist. A reviewer has one job, not just to judge a product, but to understand what it actually is. IGN didn't review Where Winds Meet. They reviewed the version of it that lived in their head. And I thank the gods that Everstone didn't listen. They didn't build this game for Western journalists who want another focus-tested product. They built it for the gamers. They built it for people who dream of the Jung-Hoo.